Alright, before you scroll, do me one honest favor. Put the phone face down for a second, close the extra tabs, kill the notifications, and actually sit with this one. Because what we are staring at right now with Kendrick Lamar, Drake, and the small army of fans still swinging on Drake's behalf is not a hip-hop argument anymore. It is not internet noise. It is not, oh, the comments section is doing what the comments section always does. I am telling you, plainly, calmly, on the record, it is something a lot more medical than that. It is a fan base living inside a delusion so tightly welded shut that reality is now bouncing off the walls of it. We are in the middle of the summer of 2026. The confetti from Super Bowl 59 got vacuumed off that field a long time ago. The Grammys have been won, boxed up, and stacked on a shelf. And we are 2 full years, 24 full months, past the night that last diss record hit the streaming platforms and cracked the internet in half. 2 years. And I would be robbing you of the truth if I let the surface headlines about that Toronto Park moment slide by without connecting the wiring underneath it. Because while every other channel was busy laughing at a viral clip, treating it like a funny little Tuesday morning meme, the actual story was sitting one layer down, in the exact psychological blueprint that made that clip mathematically guaranteed. What almost nobody has said out loud is that this is not a moment. This is an infrastructure collapse. Everybody keeps circling back to the same tired question. Who won? Ask a different one. Ask why the losing side of a 2-year-old scoreboard is bleeding harder in the summer of 2026 than it was on the exact day Not Like Us went live. That is the question the algorithm doesn't want you to sit with, and that is the question we are going to sit with together right now. Because if you stay with me for the next 15 minutes, I am going to walk you through the exact chain of decisions, filings, and public collapses that turned the biggest name in modern hip-hop into a case study in slow-motion self-erasure. And I am going to show you the receipts, in order, in sequence, with the timestamps intact, so that by the time we get to the end of this you will never look at a Drake headline the same way again. Watch the frame. That short clip from a park in Toronto is not a joke. It is a crime scene, and we owe it a forensic look. Broad daylight. The 6. The city Drake has spent the last decade and a half building an entire cinematic identity around, protecting like it was a family heirloom. Some regular guy at a public cookout has his speaker playing Not Like Us. He is not pointing it at anybody. He is not staging a protest. He is not shooting a music video. He is just playing a song. And a Drake loyalist walks over, grabs that speaker like it personally insulted his bloodline, and hurls it across the concrete. Frees it right before he throws it. Look at what he is wearing. The OVO fitted, block letters, tilted at that exact angle you only tilt a hat when you think a camera might be watching. That is not a wardrobe decision. That is a uniform. That is a flag. And you can see it in his face too. He genuinely believes he is defending the kingdom. He thinks he is doing the boss a favor. But real talk, the boss did not ask. The boss did not send the memo. The boss is sitting in a mansion in the bridle path right now, and he has no idea some grown man in his city is about to catch a vandalism report on his behalf. Zoom in on the body language for a second, because that is where the whole story hides. His shoulders are already tight before he even reaches the speaker. His jaw is set. His feet are moving faster than his brain is. That is not a man reacting to a song. That is a man reacting to the 2 full years of pressure that song has been quietly loading onto his identity. He has been carrying that weight in comment sections. He has been carrying it in group chats. He has been carrying it at family cookouts where his little cousin plays the wrong track on the wrong speaker, and now, in that park, the weight finally finds a target it can throw. And then, of course, this is where it gets interesting, because the same loyalist comes back online a few hours later. No music. No filter. No hype. Just him, sitting in his car, trying to look calm. But look at his eyes. Watch his voice crack in the middle of his own sentence. His body is signing a confession his mouth is not ready to write yet. He tells the camera he did it because he did not want, quote, Canadians to look like clowns in front of the Americans. Am I the only one who hears that? And here's a man walking himself into an even deeper hole? He destroys somebody's speaker to save face, realizes he committed the whole thing to 4K, and then, get this, he sets up a fundraiser to help pay for the very speaker he just launched into the pavement. Read that back to yourself one more time. He committed the crime, filmed the crime, went home, sat in a car, opened a camera, admitted to the crime, and then opened a payment link so the internet could subsidize the aftermath of the crime. That is not defense. That is not loyalty. That is a live-streamed nervous breakdown with a donation button attached. Now here is the piece I need you to hold in your pocket, because it explains everything that comes next. That loyalist is not an isolated case. He is a symptom. He is the visible tip of an emotional glacier, and the glacier is the Drake fan base, in 2026, still trying to defend a mirror that has already cracked. Because to understand why a grown man is throwing speakers in the summer of 2026, you have to wind the clock backward to a very specific decision Drake made in the spring of 2024. It is one of those decisions that looks small in the moment and looks enormous in the rearview mirror. Kendrick Lamar had just drawn a line in the sand. He had already delivered records with the kind of surgical precision that made every other rapper's phone buzz all night long. And Drake, at that intersection, had 3 doors in front of him. Door 1, silence. Retreat to the mansion. Let the internet devour its own tail. Door 2, distraction. Drop a soft summer pop record. Starve the beef of oxygen. Door 3, engagement. Pyrotechnics. War. Drake picked door 3. And it was not even a hesitation. He walked out of the studio with tailor-made freestyle, weaponized AI Tupac against a West Coast god, and tried to run the 1998 Prince intimidation playbook inside a 2024 algorithmic ecosystem. Drake thought he was walking into another one of those reality show confrontations he had spent his whole career editing. He thought he could shape the final cut. What he did not realize was that Kendrick Lamar had already replaced the entire studio, the cameras, the boom mic, and even the light board. The environment had shifted, and Drake was still holding a script from the old show. And that is the part the loyalists cannot wrap their heads around, even now. This was never a matter of who had the better bars, or who had the harder beat, or who had the bigger cosign. This was a matter of who understood the room they were actually standing in. Kendrick Lamar walked into that fight understanding that the room was no longer a rap battle. The room was a data-driven engagement ecosystem, and every syllable was a lever, and every ad-lib was a hook, and every image was a piece of installation art designed to sit inside the culture forever. Drake walked in swinging at ghosts of arguments Kendrick was never going to have. Because Kendrick Lamar did not just record a better diss track. That is the piece the algorithms will not tell you and the reaction channels never bothered to say out loud. Kendrick engineered a piece of audio that was designed to weld itself into the emotional wiring of Drake's parasocial army. Not Like Us was not built to win a rap battle. Not Like Us was built to permanently rewrite the operating system of every fan who had spent a decade tying their identity to Drake's success. That is the moment the timeline splits in half. That is the fracture. Because when Kendrick delivered his verdict, he did not just defeat Drake on paper. He shattered the mirror Drake had been living inside for 15 years. And when a mirror like that shatters, the people standing closest to it get cut first. That is why, in the summer of 2026, you have loyalists losing their composure in public parks. It is not the record they are reacting to. It is the reflection that got broken. And once a reflection like that breaks, you cannot glue it back with a mixtape. You cannot buy it back with a feature. You cannot lawyer it back with a filing. The reflection stays broken until the person standing in front of it finds the courage to walk away and buy a new mirror. Drake has not done that yet. Every single move he has made in the last 2 years has been another attempt to tape the old mirror back together in public, which only ensures that the cracks keep getting photographed. Now for anybody catching this cold, let me reconstruct the timeline, because the narrative that formed in the immediate aftermath of the spring of 2024 was almost completely wrong. The blogs, the reaction channels, the comment section cleanup crew, they all treated the beef like a sports match with a final whistle. They tallied the numbers, handed Kendrick Lamar the trophy, and assumed Drake would take a couple months to recover and drop a Caribbean-flavored summer pack to reset the board. That was the soft story. That was the fairy tale. Because while everybody was watching the streaming counters break every existing record, something a lot stranger was going on behind the gates of Drake's own house. Sit with this for a second. The first public signal of the collapse did not come from a song. It came from the deletion of one. Tailor-made freestyle disappeared from the internet. The passive-aggressive Instagram captions started stacking up. The meme deflections got louder and less funny with each pass. If you actually go back and audit Drake's digital footprint across that summer, second by second, you are not watching a master strategist executing a pivot. You are watching a man padding the walls of a room, looking for a light switch that Kendrick already unscrewed. And every misstep in that footprint compounds. Every deleted post is a receipt. Every awkward Instagram story is a receipt. Every rushed guest verse that hits the algorithm with a lower engagement floor than expected is a receipt. And the receipts stack. That is the ugly part of doing business with the internet in 2026. Once the ledger opens, it does not close on your timeline. It closes on the culture's timeline. And Drake, for the first time in his adult career, is not the one holding the pen. And then, wind the clock forward, we hit the summer of 2025. The Rogers Center run. This is the moment the emotional map of hip-hop got officially redrawn in front of 60,000 human beings. Kendrick Lamar and SZA rolled the Grand National Tour into Toronto. Into the 6. Straight into the middle of the room Drake had been decorating for 15 years. And what happened? The stadium did not boo. The stadium did not throw anything. The stadium sang every single word back at him. Louder than the speakers. Louder than the mix. Louder than any counternarrative Drake or his team could stitch together in the following months. That was the moment the room told the truth. That was the moment the ledger got stamped in permanent ink. Because let me tell you something about a home crowd. A home crowd will tolerate an opposing artist. A home crowd will politely applaud out of manners. But a home crowd only sings a record back at that volume when the record has already replaced the local anthem. And that is what Not Like Us did in Drake's own city. It replaced the anthem. It moved into the neighborhood. And Drake, sitting in his mansion less than a 20-minute drive from the venue, could hear it in his ribs. And here is the detail nobody wants to name, because it stings. In the crowd that night, on the phone footage that leaked in the 24 hours after, you could pick out the OVO merch. You could see the chain culture. You could see the fitted caps. You could see the same aesthetic Drake spent a decade shaping, and you could see it singing back the words of the man Drake filed against. That is not a beef result. That is a cultural coup. That is the fan base itself briefly stepping outside the fortress to breathe fresh air, and once a fan base takes that breath, it never fully goes back inside. That is how a monument becomes a museum. Slowly. Then all at once. Then the tour buses arrive to photograph it. But here is the maneuver almost nobody talks about, because this is the maneuver that changed everything. When the music stopped working, Drake did not go back to the studio. He did not disappear for a full album cycle. He did not do the thing rappers of his generation used to do, which is sit in the discomfort for a while and let the next great verse do the arguing. Drake pointed his legal apparatus at his own record label. He filed against Universal Music Group. And I do not think the average listener has any idea what that decision actually detonated inside the industry. When you attack the parent company that is supposed to be pushing your catalog, the parent company does not get louder about you. It gets quieter. The invisible promotional weight you used to receive on autopilot, the algorithmic nudges, the cross-catalog recommendations, the front-page banners on the streaming platforms, that weight starts moving. It moves toward artists who are not creating legal problems for the parent company. And that is the exact piece Drake loyalists miss when they wave the daily stream counter in your face. Yes, Drake still puts up huge raw numbers. He has one of the biggest catalogs in the modern era. But raw volume is not the metric that matters at this level. Placement quality is the metric. Editorial trust is the metric. And in the arithmetic of this, when you audit how Drake's catalog is currently being consumed against how Kendrick Lamar's discography is being consumed, you can literally watch the migration happen in real time. Drake's music is drifting into the background. Gym playlists. Car playlists. Ambient. Kendrick Lamar's music is being programmed as cultural landmarks. Album drops as national events. Verses as citations. And I say this with my whole chest, Drake, that is not a pivot. That is a slow slide. You do not sue the plumbing system inside a building you still need to live in. You call a plumber. You take the meeting. You settle the invoice. You do not walk into court and try to burn the pipes down while your own bathwater is still running. And that is the exact metaphor that captures what Drake did to his own promotional apparatus. He set fire to the plumbing while he was still living in the house. Look at how the events stack in sequence. Tailor-made deletion, the passive-aggressive posting summer, the Rogers Center sing-along, the GNX rollout, the Super Bowl 59 halftime, the Grammy sweep, the UMG filing, the appeal, the Iceman era rollouts, the Toronto Park incident, and now, right now, the loyalists melting down on camera and turning the meltdown into a fundraiser. That is not the trajectory of an artist recovering. That is the trajectory of an artist actively demolishing the monument he spent 15 years welding together. And you can hear it, too, because the room is starting to whisper about it. Because the story is not just about Drake anymore. The story is about the artists around Drake who used to be first in line on the OVO group text, first in line to jump on a feature, first in line to co-sign an Instagram post. And keep this in your pocket, over the last 24 months, that circle has thinned out. The rappers who used to run to a Drake feature have gotten polite. Cool. Distant. And that silence, my friend, is not neutral. That silence is a data point. In this industry, when the phone stops ringing and the cosigns stop landing on the usual schedule, that is the culture telling you something a press release will never confirm. The culture does not do open disrespect. The culture does something more brutal. The culture does the polite distance. You hear it in every serious podcast now. When Drake's name comes up, the room tone changes. The laughter gets thinner. The compliments get more careful. And every so often, somebody actually says it out loud, that this is not about the charts anymore. This is about a man's mental orbit. About whether he is okay. That is a very different kind of concern. That is not competitive concern. That is the room quietly praying for somebody it used to compete against. And once the room shifts from competing with you to praying for you, you are not in the same industry anymore. You are in a memorial wing of it. And the memorial wing has really nice lighting, but the lighting is not the same as the main floor. The main floor is where the deals happen. The memorial wing is where the tributes happen. Drake, right now, is standing between the two rooms, and every 90 days the door behind him quietly clicks shut a little further. Now, and this is the piece the algorithms will not tell you, I would be robbing you of the truth if I did not connect this human collapse to the industrial aftershock we are living inside of right now. Because the aftermath is not just personal. The aftermath is structural. Let's start with the legal outcomes. The Universal Music Group case gave the industry a new precedent. Before Drake, the unspoken rule was that a rapper takes his shots in the booth, wins or loses in the booth, and moves on. Drake broke that rule. He pulled a diss track into a courtroom. And whether he ever intended it or not, he handed every future artist a permission slip they should not have been given. Now every diss record has a legal shadow behind it. Now every label lawyer has a new checklist. Now every artist who wants to swing back has to think about not just the response record, but the response filing. And that is a very different industry than the one Drake grew up in. Every A&R meeting in 2026 now has a lawyer at the table. Every clearance call for a new sample now has an extra column asking whether the reference could be construed as a coded diss. Every executive at every major is now asking the same quiet question before greenlighting a marketing spend, which is whether the artist in question is likely to sue the label 6 months from now the way Drake did. That is the environmental change he detonated. That is not a footnote. That is a chapter in every entertainment law textbook that will get written in the next 5 years, and Drake's name will be on the case citation for as long as those textbooks stay in print. Then look at the corporate ripple. When Kendrick Lamar dropped GNX and anchored the Super Bowl 59 halftime, that was not a performance. That was a corporate coronation. The entire Fortune 500 layer of America was watching. Advertisers were watching. Streaming executives were watching. Sports leagues were watching. And the contrast could not have been more brutal. Because while Kendrick Lamar was standing on the biggest stage in American entertainment, Drake was spending 2026 releasing what everybody agrees is competent, professional, perfectly listenable material under the Iceman era rollout. But it does not move the needle. And it does not move the needle because every stream of every new Drake song now arrives in a listener's brain already tagged with a 2-year-old verdict. He cannot outproduce that tag. He cannot outfeature that tag. He cannot outvacation that tag. The tag is welded on. This is a full migration of brand equity. Corporate brands are recalibrating. The reality show franchises that orbit hip-hop culture are recalibrating. The high fashion houses are recalibrating. Some of them very quietly. Some of them are so cautious about it that reality TV cast members on the secondary networks are refusing to film scenes with Drake's newest music playing in the background, because they know the association is currently radioactive to their own social metrics. When your neighbors on the D-list reality TV grid are editing you out of their own lifestyle shots to protect their own numbers, your cultural temperature has dropped below freezing. That is data, not drama. And it circles right back to the fan base. The loyalists throwing speakers at cookouts. The Twitter accounts that post 12 times a day defending stream counts. They are not reacting to Kendrick Lamar. They are reacting to this shift in temperature. They can feel the room getting colder. They can hear the podcast hosts who used to praise Drake now doing that careful, cool, distant thing. They can watch the algorithm pushing somebody else's project instead of theirs. And because they merged their whole personality with his success, they are experiencing his decline as a personal attack on their own self-image. So they cannot sit quiet. They have to perform. They have to swing. They have to film the apology after they swing, and then they have to launch the fundraiser to cover the swing. Because if they stop performing, they have to admit the mirror actually did crack. They have to admit that the reality they built their whole social identity on for a decade and a half was, in the end, just a very well-produced show. And admitting that is not a small thing. Admitting that is the hardest thing a parasocial fan will ever be asked to do, because it is not just admitting the artist lost. It is admitting the version of themselves that grew up believing in that artist lost too. It is admitting that a whole chapter of their life needs to be recatalogued, mentally, quietly, without ceremony. Most of them will not do it. Most of them will keep throwing speakers instead. We are watching the death of a very specific kind of celebrity. The kind of celebrity who assumed he could outsmart the internet forever. The kind of celebrity who confused constant visibility for permanent relevance. The kind of celebrity who kept posting through it, thinking that if he simply refused to stop talking, the culture would eventually forget to keep score. But the internet, once it starts keeping score, does not stop. The internet is the most patient historian we have ever built. And Drake is finding that out right now, in real time, 1 quarter at a time. But here is where this refuses to end. Because as much as the timeline wants to package this into a neat 2-hour YouTube compilation and call it history, the reality is way more dangerous than that. The paperwork is still being filed. The receipts are still being printed. And somewhere, right now, inside a gated home in Toronto, the next chapter is already being drafted. What still hangs in the air is the actual cost of the litigation. Drake's appeal against Universal Music Group is still active. The industry is watching every filing. Every quarter, the case burns more oxygen. Every quarter, the case tightens the very system Drake needs to be at peace with in order to release music the way he used to. And that is the peace that would have ended this 2 years ago if he had let it. The refusal is the problem. Every extra year he keeps this alive is another year that not like us hardens into a permanent scoreboard in the culture's memory. Every extra year is another chapter Kendrick Lamar does not have to write. Every extra year is another chapter Drake keeps writing for him, for free. Think about that for a second. Every legal motion he files, every appeal he pushes forward, every press cycle he restarts around the case, is another organic search result Kendrick Lamar's team did not have to lift a finger to plant. Drake is doing the SEO work for his own scoreboard. He is his own algorithmic accelerant against himself. And nobody in his camp has been able to talk him down from that, which tells you everything you need to know about the internal culture of his operation right now. Because the real observation you need to take home from this, the piece I want tattooed inside your skull, is that Kendrick Lamar built a piece of cultural infrastructure that has kept running every single day since he pressed play on it. Zero maintenance required. Zero follow-up needed from the architect. It compounds. It does not decay. It does not fade. And Drake, instead of accepting that outcome and pivoting toward the future, chose to sue his own machine. And in doing so, he permanently altered his relationship with the very apparatus that used to elevate him for free. That is a permanent change. That is not a phase. That is not a season. That is a rewiring of the relationship between an artist and the industry that made him. The contrast writes itself. One artist made a record that ended the conversation. The other one keeps trying to reopen the conversation, and every time he does, the receipts pile up higher against him. And every 90 days, those receipts get harder to argue with. And here is the cold truth about receipts. Receipts are not opinions. Receipts do not care about your loyalty. Receipts do not care about your OVO chain or your Toronto passport or the year you first pressed play on Take Care. Receipts sit inside filings, inside stream reports, inside courtroom transcripts, inside the quiet spreadsheets label executives look at behind closed doors on Monday mornings. And those spreadsheets, right now, in the summer of 2026, are telling a story about Drake that no fitted cap loyalist in a Toronto park is equipped to argue against. Which is why the argument keeps escalating in the parks, and never in the spreadsheets. Because the spreadsheets already stopped arguing back a long time ago. But now let me pivot back to the loyalist for a second, because he is the perfect closing exhibit. Look at him one more time. Standing in that park. OVO fitted tilted just right. Throwing a stranger speaker across concrete because he thinks he is defending an empire. He is not defending an empire. He is defending a memory. He is defending the version of Drake he grew up on, the version that dominated the summer of 2015, 2016, 2017, that ran every mixtape season and every award show, that felt untouchable. That version is a memory now. And he knows it, deep in his bones. That version of Drake ran radio, ran clubs, ran commercials, ran ringtones, ran every award show pre-roll, ran every airport playlist. That version could not be avoided even if you tried. That version was inescapable, and inescapability was the whole brand. But inescapability is a fragile thing in an algorithmic economy. Inescapability requires the machine to keep pushing you into every open lane by default. And the moment the machine stops pushing you by default, inescapability collapses into optional. And optional is a killing word for a career like the one Drake built. Optional is the moment the loyalist stops hearing his favorite artist in the wild and has to start seeking him out on purpose. And the second seeking has to happen, the empire has already downgraded itself into a fan club. Drake, in 2026, is running a fan club with the marketing budget of an empire. And you can feel that mismatch in every rollout. That is why his voice cracked in the follow-up video. That is why he had to launch a fundraiser instead of just paying for the speaker himself. Because if he simply paid quietly, the incident goes away. But if he turns it into a spectacle, if he turns it into a public performance of loyalty, then maybe, just maybe, the mirror does not have to be broken. Maybe he can convince a few more people that everything is fine. Maybe he can convince himself. And that self-convincing is the invisible engine that keeps this whole cycle running. It is not Drake keeping this alive on his own. It is thousands of individual self-convincing rituals happening in cars, in bedrooms, in cookout parking lots, in Twitter drafts, in TikTok stitches, every single day, all of them pointed at the same emotional problem, which is that the world has quietly moved on and they refuse to move with it. Every one of those rituals is fuel. Every one of them keeps the fire going. And Drake, whether he means to or not, keeps handing out more fuel with every filing. And that is the tragedy hidden inside the comedy of that clip. Every Drake loyalist right now, at some level, is doing the same performance. Some of them louder. Some of them quieter. Some of them in comment sections. Some of them on podcasts. Some of them in group chats. Every one of them is trying, in their own small way, to hold the mirror together with tape. And every time Kendrick Lamar releases a piece of new material, or every time a new streaming report drops, or every time Drake picks up the pen again and writes another response that lands with a lighter thud than the last, another piece of that mirror falls to the floor. This is the anatomy of a slow-motion collapse. And it will not end in a headline. It will not end in a press release. It will not end in a public apology. It will end quietly, in filings, in stream reports, in the polite distance the culture is already keeping. That is how legacies really shift. Not with a bang. Not with a viral moment. With a long, slow, quarter-by-quarter drain of the invisible things that used to be automatic. The playlist ads that used to arrive without asking. The magazine covers that used to schedule themselves. The Sunday morning talk show mentions that used to happen because the host's producer already had you on the mood board. All of that used to be automatic for Drake. None of that is automatic anymore. Every one of those things now requires a phone call, a favor, a receipt of its own. And when the automatic goes away, the artist has to become a salesperson again. Drake, for the first time in 15 years, is having to sell himself back into rooms that used to buy him on site. Nobody in his camp will say that out loud. But the calendars, the itineraries, the guest list emails, they all say it in ink. And the ink does not lie. The ink does not care about the number of platinum plaques on the wall. The ink does not care about the streaming crown on the shelf. The ink only cares about what got scheduled this month and what got quietly dropped from last month, and those columns, side by side, tell you exactly where an artist actually sits in the machine on any given Tuesday. And Drake's columns, right now, are running two very different stories at the same time. The catalog column still looks like a giant. The forward calendar column looks like a man asking a lot more meetings than he used to have to ask for. That gap is where a career like this actually breaks. Not in the diss track. Not in the courtroom. In the meetings that used to book themselves and now require phone calls. Kendrick Lamar, meanwhile, is on the opposite side of that gap. His forward calendar is filling itself. His catalog is compounding. His scoreboard is running without him. That is what a permanent victory actually looks like when you strip away the fireworks and the internet noise. It looks like a calendar that fills itself while the other guy has to keep dialing. And once the dialing starts, the balance of power in every conversation quietly flips. The person who has to make the call is never the person who sets the terms of the call. Kendrick Lamar is not making those calls. Drake is. And every one of those calls, whether he realizes it or not, is a small deposit into a scoreboard that was already sealed shut 2 years ago. Every one of those calls confirms, to the assistants and the junior executives and the calendar holders who actually run this business, that Drake is now in the position of asking, while Kendrick Lamar is in the position of receiving. That is a status shift you cannot undo with a features run. That is a status shift you cannot undo with a stadium tour. That is the kind of status shift only time itself can rewrite, and time, for Drake, is currently working the other way. So drop it below and let the room decide, because I know some of you are already typing. Some of you are Drake Day ones from 2009 who feel personally violated right now. Some of you are Kendrick Lamar fans who have been waiting for a full recap. Some of you are neutral observers who just want to watch two titans redraw the map. All three of you belong here. But the question I actually want in the comments section, the one I want you to sit with before you type, is this. Is Drake even capable of shutting up at this point? Or has 15 years of constant broadcast rewired him to the point that silence feels like death? Because everything I have laid out tonight only ends if the man in the mansion decides to stop reaching for the pen. And every single sign, every filing, every rollout, every quiet response record, every appeal, every Iceman era teaser tells you the pen is still moving. The pen is not going down. Which means the 90-day receipts are still coming. Which means the next chapter of this book is already being written, and Kendrick Lamar does not have to lift a finger. And that, right there, is the definition of a permanent scoreboard. A scoreboard your opponent no longer has to update because you keep updating it for him. A scoreboard that runs on the fuel of your own refusal to let it die. A scoreboard that becomes, over time, a museum exhibit, then a case study, then a textbook chapter, then a lecture in a university seminar, then a documentary sequel. That is the arc. That is where we are headed. And we are headed there whether Drake picks up the pen tomorrow or not. And time, in the culture we live in now, does not just tick. Time compounds. Time stacks. Time in the algorithmic era behaves less like a clock and more like a bank account, and every 90-day cycle either deposits into your account or withdraws from it, and Drake's account, right now, is running a withdrawal streak nobody in his camp has been able to reverse. I am parked front row for whatever comes next. Stay sharp. Stay watching. Stay ready. And if this broke something down for you the way I hope it did, drop a like, subscribe if you have not yet, and I will meet you in the next breakdown, because there is one more piece of this puzzle that connects Kendrick Lamar's Super Bowl 59 halftime to a very specific corporate decision that has not been reported yet. That is the video you want to be here for. That one is going to change how you look at every single move Drake makes for the next 12 months. Until then, keep your eyes on the receipts, keep your ears on the room, and I will see you at the front row of the next one.